Wauwatosa School Board on February 13th to order with the moment of silent reflection, please. Mrs. Galante, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Fee? Here. Mr. Giroz?
Here.
Mr. Kroner?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Mrs. Muehlfeld? Here. Mrs. Randall? Here. Mrs. Weber?
Here. I'd like to read one statement, please. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinion and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comments on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment on an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comments regarding the non-agenda items this evening. With that, is there anyone who would like to speak to the consent agenda items? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kroner. Board members, are there any items on the consent agenda that you wish to have withdrawn to speak individually? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Excuse me,
Yes.
if I may just make a statement. This is the consent agenda that I hate to see every year because it has our retirements on it. And I just wanted to make a comment about that and thank those who are retiring this year for their service. There are 3 specifically that I've had interactions with who I think will be a great loss to our educational community. And I speak specifically of Janine Brennan, Bruce Johnson, and Judy West. And I'm sure that others in the room have similar feelings about other people on that list, but I would like to thank each of them for their work and their service to this district and wish them the best in their retirement.
Thank you.
Mr.
This
Kroner?
is Mr. Kroner?
Yes, I also noticed that Rob Engel's name is on this list, and I just wanted to acknowledge all the work that he's done for the district, an outstanding job in the band program that he and his wife have done over the years. My child is a musician, and the one thing I've noticed about the program that they have, not only is it academically rigorous, but he has made a special effort to allow kids to get together to play music outside of class and help them get gigs in the community, and really promoted the musical experience in Wauwatosa. I think one of my favorite quotes about him was when the band was coming back from a trip on Saturday afternoon at a particular time, and we had a conflict, and I asked my son, well, is the band going to be back at 12:30? And my son said, if the Engels say it's going to be there at 12:30, it will be there at 12:30. And so they're very well organized, and they did tremendous work with the band and the music program at East High School.
Thank you, Mr. Kroner. This is one meeting I really hate to be at. In fact, I would really enjoy being absent tonight because I hate, as Mrs. Fee, Mr. Kroner have mentioned, we are losing such wonderful people who have given so much to this community. But I still want to respect their wishes, that they enjoy their retirement, and we certainly appreciate all that they have given. May we, let's see, we need a roll call on this, I think. We didn't do that yet. So may we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Giroz?
Yes.
Mr. Kroner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes.
Mrs. Weber?
Yes, and the cash register is right here on the table if anyone wishes to review that. Recognitions, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Weber. It's really my pleasure to read this recognition this evening. The West High School We the People Citizen and Constitution team set a new state of Wisconsin record by winning its 5th consecutive state championship recently. Members of the West team are Annie Albers, Erin Billstrom, Brianna Blinkowitz, Patrick Campbell, Brian Carlson, Kevin Detleff, Stephanie Eberly, Jennifer Flynn, Hannah Frisch, Kylie Hogreff, Mandy Homer, Mariana Wanario, Dana Kotzner, Elizabeth Kuna Hildebrandt, Krista Lambo, Jordan Lannis, Mickey Morgan, Maggie Overholt, Beth Pierce, Leah Rogers, Susie Shively, Laurel Stutz, Jenny Seiberg, Cece Vang, and Jack Wongtam. Chad Metesky, West APSI teacher, is the advisor for the team, and attorneys Mark Young and Tom Schneck, former West parents, volunteered their time to work with the West students throughout the year, as they have in many past years. The West team also had the benefit of guidance from Katie Adams and Mitch Boltman, teaching assistants from last year's team. Wauwatosa East High School sent 2 teams to the We the People Citizen and Constitution competition, taking 2nd and 3rd place. The 2nd place team will compete at the national event in Washington, D.C. in April. Members of the East team are Bo Allison, Alex Brannon, Ian Klein, Meg Dwyer, Leah Eisenhower, Dan Erickson, William Gambon, Peter Garofalo, Libby Hallinger-Bernstein, Rose Hayes Deneen, Megan Hoos, Geneva Kennedy, Vincent Currens, Frankie Ludwig, Gillian McBride, Joe Metz, Ben Milik, Kieran O'Day, John Pash, and Jack Pankrat, Jack Stelman, Sam Schultz, Rose Spice Kopeshki, Zoe Stefaniak, Lena Tomazik, Claire Urban, and Derek Wolf. Elea Meyer, East APSI teacher, is the advisor for the team with the assistance of attorney Jane Dwyer and East alum Tyler Marson. The We the People program prepares students for state and national level events with a challenging social studies and history curriculum. At the simulated congressional hearings, students answer questions posed by volunteer panels consisting of lawyers, legislators, and educational professionals. Members of the class become expert witnesses on one of 6 units in the curriculum and then testify before the judges, acting as U.S. congressional representatives. The curriculum's design and mock congressional hearing format combine to make this program unique because it addresses the academic standards required in Wisconsin's K-12 curriculum while also challenging students to develop both individual and team skills. The teams will begin preparation for the national topics and questions in February before heading to Washington, D.C. in April to compete against the other 49 state champions. While there, the teams will compete in front of some of the leading scholars in the nation, serving as judges, as well as tour the monuments, memorials, and museums. If schedules allow, the students will also have the opportunity to meet with members of Congress. Phenomenal.
Wauwatosa West Latin Club students participated in the Wisconsin State Junior Classical League Convention/competition in Madison for the first time in more than 40 years with excellent results. The team members are Kayla Matuzanek, Brendan Michael, and Mark Salamone. Neil Schaefer, Latin teacher at East and West, serves as the team's advisor. The team placed 3rd in the qualitative sweepstakes. Individual awards went to Mark Salamone, placed 1st, 2nd, or 3rd on 10 different tests. Brendan Michael and Kayla Matuzanek also placed in the top 10 in several areas. The individual awards contributed to the team's overall 3rd place finish. Bethel Asifa, a senior at East High School, has qualified as a National Achievement Scholarship Program, NASP, finalist. The NASP is an academic competition established in 1964 to provide recognition for outstanding Black American high school students. Achievement Scholar recipients will be selected from the finalist group on the basis of their abilities, accomplishments, and potential for success in rigorous college studies.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, please, Mr. Meyer.
I'd like to comment on particularly on the We the People effort. In the big flurry of budget activity in Congress this past year, funding for that was dropped. And a lot of people on the state level in Wisconsin and on the local level stepped up to make sure the kids could have this experience. And I'd just like to thank all of those who made sure that the kids in Wisconsin would still have this opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. We wish each one of these young people much success. They put in a lot of work, and it's so impressive when you hear them speak and their response to questions. So again, I just wish them, on behalf of the board, great success, not only for this, but as they continue in their studies. Human Resources, please, Mrs. Fee.
Number 1, Policy 8462, Student Abuse and Neglect Revision. It is recommended that the school board approve revisions to Policy 8462, Student Abuse and Neglect, as required by Wisconsin Statutes 118.07. The revisions were presented and discussed at the January 23rd board meeting. Number 2, the 2012-2013 school calendar. It is recommended that the school board approve the 2012-2013 school calendar as presented and discussed at the January 23rd board meeting, and I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Randall. Board members, any comments or questions? Seeing none, is there any audience comments, please, on the human resource items? Seeing none, is there, may we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Giroux?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes.
Mrs. Weber?
Yes. And reports to the board, student services, please. Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Thank you. Tonight what I'm doing is just going through with you and making a recommendation for how we would determine space for students with disabilities into our school district through open enrollment. The Department of Public Instruction, in addition to having our policy where we actually determine space in general, one of the things that we do as we go through the applications, families have to inform us if the student is or is not a student with a disability, so we can do an additional screening and determine if we can accept the student based on whether or not we have space. So the recommendation we're putting forth is that we determine space with the following numbers, that there's a caseload of 1 to 5 for special education teachers in a building, and a caseload of 1 to 15 for speech and language pathologists. That's our recommendation to the board.
Board members, questions or comments? Yes, Mrs. Randall.
Is there any change in this, Teresa? I thought the statute stated previously that if we couldn't afford to provide the services, if there was a monetary issue.
It's been, last year was the first year the department made more of a loose recommendations that school boards consider it. And actually the new bill that was signed, there's actually now language that says that school boards should establish parameters for how they would determine space. So I think the Department of Public Instruction has been a little bit, they've been a little bit better at offering us guidelines, because in the end, if we would deny an applicant who is a student with disabilities and that family would appeal to the Department of Public Instruction, we would need to explain to them why we made that decision to deny it. And so if we have some hard numbers with space, they would uphold our appeal.
Okay, so we wouldn't be required to hire staff to accommodate.
Correct. That's the point of the numbers that we're recommending, is that typically our staffing for special education teachers is higher than a caseload of 5 for special education teachers and higher than a caseload of 15 for speech pathologists.
Okay.
So we wouldn't have any space.
Defining what we were already doing,
Correct.
but making it more specific.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any further comments or questions? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this? I don't think I mentioned before, if anyone wishes to make a comment, we would ask that you just come up to the mic and give us your name and address. Again, are there any comments on this item? Seeing none, we can move on, please, to Superintendent, the STEM report.
Thank you. Tonight we have a group of people that have been working on a program for middle school STEM, and they are here to share it this evening. Mr. Zerwick and Ms. Greenman are the two administrators that are leading this, so I will turn it over.
Thank you. And I just want to say it's a pleasure being here tonight. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our steering committee. To my left, your right, we have Jerry Mers, we have Christy Casey, we have Jay Henderson. Jay is a teacher over at Longfellow. And we have April Greenman, who's one of the associate over at Whitman. And behind me, we have Bill Anderson, we have Jason Galen, Mike Leach, and we have Jamie Price, a couple of our team members who could not be here tonight. Ed Price, Katie Wynn, and Jeff Liker. And it's been an absolute pleasure working on this initiative. And I think it's very exciting to see where we've gotten to since October. When we first started exploring...
May we ask the administrator and the teachers in the back to stand? I don't know if the audience will see them at home, but at least would you stand to be recognized? Mr. Leach? Mr. Galen, thank you. I know a lot of work has been put into this, so again, thank you.
When we first started meeting back in October, we were looking at how we could roll this into the middle school. We started talking about, would this be a charter? Would this be a program? Early on in our conversations and the development of our committee, we really established this being a program at the middle school. And when we first started exploring this, our main goal was to create another avenue for learners, which brings us to STEM. Our goal is to appeal to different learning styles and create an environment where students will apply science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in all content and in context with, or which will connect school, community careers, and the global economy. And a lot of times when we're talking about this, meeting with parents, getting questions from different community members or different staff members, the question is there a need for this? And I think what's interesting is you're going to hear a lot about what the need is right now. And looking at where we are right now, in our next slide we have currently what's going on here in our school district. K-12, in our current programs alone, we have over 400 students who are doing STEM-like curriculums, whether it's WSTEM, the Gateway to Technology, and the Project Lead the Way courses at the high schools. Plus, we have another 160 other students who are extending their learning through different activities outside the school day, whether it's the Lego League, the Robotics Club, Destination Imagination, Ruth Goldberg machine demonstrations, and in the future we're looking at the Future City competition as well. And again, we want to make sure all of our students are taking advantage of what STEM can offer, and that we want to be in a district that's appealing to all different types of learners. And I will turn it over to Ms. Casey.
I think as we have grown and developed as an elementary charter school, this has always been a want for the children and families of WSTEM, that once the kids go through this program, you know, what can we offer them? What kind of choices can we offer them at the middle school level? So knowing that was a want for the WSTEM families, we thought, you know what, let's ask the rest of the district how they feel about this. And we put out a survey to the rest of the district through SurveyMonkey. We sent it to K through 6 families. And we had 294 responses in the first week. And it really proved to be tremendous support for kind of the STEM options at the middle school level. 40% of respondents came from Longfellow and Whitman. There were also responses from all 11 elementary schools in the district. We see the highest percentage of responses came from 6th grade, 5th grade, and 4th grade. And the first question on the survey asked, would you consider enrolling your child next year in a multi-age STEM program if offered at the middle school? And 80% of the respondents replied yes. If you look at the trend and break it down a little bit more, you'll see that 6th and 5th grade had high responses that were pretty consistent. And then you also see consistency amongst Longfellow families and Whitman families. Another anecdotal piece that I'd like to share with you is a couple weeks ago, Dean Hoist and Mike Leach held kind of an Wauwatosa program evening here at Fisher, where they were talking about the options such as Montessori or WSTEM. And they had standing room only. They had 37 families represented. Most of them had 2 parents, so there were over 60 people in attendance. And then the following week at WSTEM, we conducted tours, and we had approximately 45 to 50 families come through that week to tour. A small portion of them were people who had gone to the evening with Dean and Mike. But there was a good mixture of new families and, interestingly enough, current families, who stated, we've had older kids, we had great experiences at Eisenhower, our kids went through Roosevelt and we were really happy, but now with this child or our younger children, we're just kind of looking for different choices. So I think that was very telling, and we need to kind of look at the needs and the wants of the community. Oh, that's me. What will MSTEM look like? We're looking at a multi-age house comprising of primarily 6th and 7th grade students. We'd like to start with a minimum of 50 at both schools. Part of the reason for starting with 6th and 7th, we consulted with Barry Golden from DPI, and he's a charter school consultant. And he said, that first year you might do more harm than good with the 8th graders. So he recommended that we start with 6th and 7th grade, and then rolling out 8th grade that second year. So those 7th graders would then roll out to be 8th graders. So you'd see a house of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders working together. I think with STEM and kind of looking at project-based learning, there's a lot of collaboration that goes on, and we want this to be a situation that's reflective of the real world. And so you're going to be in situations in life where you're dealing with people of different age groups, and that's a little bit behind the philosophy of the multi-age at the middle school level. And then we're hoping that we can have a flexible day. And we think part of our conversations as a committee have been around, in middle school, a lot of the content areas is we're kind of like looking at silos, and we're hoping that if we have kids together collaborating, we'll see more cross-curricular connections between content areas throughout the day and throughout the process.
So in the classroom, MSTEM wants to take on, again, that project-based learning model, really not changing the curriculum at all that we currently have or altering any of that, but really just approaching it in a different way. So not what we're teaching, but really how students, not what we're teaching, not what we're, excuse me, not what students would be learning, but how they would be learning. Really that's the focus on the shift for MSTEM. Giving students an opportunity to learn through a more creative, collaborative process, practicing some 21st century skills. Of course, we would still be responsible to the district standards, aligned to the district content area goals. Students would participate in the assessments that measure learning as well. We would be responsible and accountable for that. But really, again, it's just kind of changing the way that students would learn. So the last piece then also is the allied arts might be a little different because we want to have a block of time where students can engage in some projects. So we're looking at some different options for scheduling as well. So the classroom, again, really would just have this kind of creative 21st century kind of skill focus where students are really kind of driving the instruction with their inquiry, and I think it'd be very exciting.
Looking at the planning process, we talked a little bit about the enrollment being a 6th and 7th grade multi-age classroom the first year, and a lot of the reasoning behind that is we really want to build that collaborative environment within our program. We also want to have students really being able to dive into the project-based learning, the inquiry-based opportunities, and more importantly for them to be able to collaborate with one another. April's going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about the lottery process. Space, we've been identifying locations at both Whitman and Longfellow as potential locations for the STEM program, with keeping in mind that we want to look at location where, if we're looking at a bank of classrooms right now, having it be able to grow in case our enrollment grows over the next few years. Also, we want to be in close proximity to our current gateway technology labs. And looking at the technology planning, talking with Jamie Price, we're looking at ways to kind of stay similar to what we are currently doing with some of the pockets of the secondary schools where it's with the iPads. We're looking at incorporating that into what we're doing, but incorporating the bring your own technology. And for students who don't have the ability to bring their own technology, we'd be working with partners and different opportunities for students to be able to check out or loan or somehow finance a device, whether it's an iPad, whether it's a notebook or whatever it may be. But we really want to incorporate bring your own technology into our schools and use that as a learning tool. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Jerry to talk about partnership opportunities.
I've talked about this before. Actually, it's we've actually added one since we wrote this document, but we want to definitely include the parents. We think it's really imperative to get the parents involved. From a learning standpoint, we've seen that in First Legos as well as Rube Goldberg. The parents are involved and also coaching, driving the process. We've also incorporated businesses where we've actually brought in engineers. Currently with Rube Goldberg, we currently have three of the four people that are working with Rube Goldberg right now are engineers, and they're actually working with the kids and pushing their fingers around, asking questions, making suggestions, getting the kids involved, and driving the process from a technology standpoint. We also have a working relationship right now with the technical schools and colleges in the area, and we want to improve upon that as well. We also have done a lot of work with nonprofit organizations. Last week we actually had two of the Lions members show up at our Rube Goldberg and just showed up and said, hey, want to see what it looks like. We got a message and said that we're here and we wanted to take a look, and they've been closely involved with it. Students are definitely part of the overall partnership because that's what we're doing it for. And then the added one that we've done, wanted to add a little bit more to, is the interaction between other school districts, whether it be the Wauwatosa, Waukesha School District, the Elmbrook School District, Greenfield, and Appleton School District. So we've been doing more and more with that, and as of this past week, Beloit School District.
Curriculum planning, to kind of restate what Jay mentioned a few minutes ago, is learning targets would be the same. Again, that pathway to get there would be looking different in the STEM. One of the pieces I think that we're looking at when we're talking about expenditures and costs to get this program up and running is looking at furniture, looking at devices that's all mobile. One of the schools that we looked at in Waukesha, the Waukesha STEM school, is all the furniture is on casters, so that way they have the ability to move it from point A to point B, depending on what the learning target is, depending on what the need is. And that's one of the pieces that we're currently looking at, is how we can incorporate that into our current locations at Longfellow and Whitman. If down the road we're realizing that we need to make a tweak or anything different with our current curriculum, we'd obviously go in front of the Curriculum Council and make the appropriate recommendations and follow the procedures for that. Again, I think, how are they learning, and as far as the learning targets that Jay mentioned earlier, is the big thing, is we want to make sure that people understand that the end goal is the same, but just that pathway is different. Jerry's going to talk about school goals.
What I'm going to talk about are basically student goals. One of the things that we looked at was what does the kid or a student come out of after they've gone through the middle school, and that one of the goals was do they understand the design process. When we talked about aerospace engineering, you said you asked if they don't go into aerospace engineering, are they going to be a waste? Well, all the way through the process, through all the learning, we want them to understand the design process, whether they're be working on some aspect of aerospace engineering, robotics, or whatever. And that's what the ultimate goal is, having gone through that. We also would like the students to be able to complete a individual learning plan where they'd actually sit down and talk about what kind of classes would they like to take in the future, whether it be the rest of their time at the middle school or eventually in high school, as it relates to math, science, and Project Lead the Way classes as well. So those are the two things. We'd also like a number of the kids to eventually leave the middle school and attend the high school Project Lead the Way classes as well.
Then looking at the goals for the school itself, I'm kind of backtracking a little bit. We want to make sure that we have a good timeline in place for selecting staff. We would like to have by April of this month a good idea of who's going to staff the school, so that we can get them trained and then give them some time to meet over the summer to work on the curriculum and how to interweave the goals and standards for the current curriculum into all of the classwork, the coursework. By June 2012, we're also looking at, and by having that, by June 2012, we're looking at identifying with the staff members, the members that would take care of the curriculum planning for the school. And then also by June of 2012, really having the entire operational document in place for all of the daily operations of the STEM program.
Good evening. I'm going to be talking about the lottery selection for MSTEM. As we mentioned before, we're looking at 50 students to start at each school. And the first round of lottery students would be the current 5th grade students with STEM experience, and also our current 6th grade students, because right now they're in our middle schools or traditional style middle schools, and so we would like to open that up for them also. And then we would roll it out to interested parties. We are going to start the application process by distributing hard copy applications to both all the elementaries and both middle schools, and also online. We'll have an online application. We will have it open from the enrollment from March 5th through the 23rd, closing on the 23rd at the end of the day, and then the lottery will take place on March 26th, with parents being notified of their acceptance on the 30th. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, the lottery process. The next slide is on budget. There will be some startup costs for MSTEM at both sites. Some of it we mentioned would be if there's any kind of curriculum development that we may have to do. We are looking at professional staff development in the areas of project-based and inquiry-based learning, which we would like to open up to all staff. Wauwatosa staff. This is not just a selective, with the 4 teachers or 6 teachers that we may have. And another thing, there was some training in the GTT so that we can incorporate gateway to technology aspects into the curriculum when they're having their 5-hour block. So that would take some extra funding for that. The classroom design, we also said that we're looking at a mobile, much more, so that the students can actually, you take a table and you can make it into a 4-pod, or you can make it into 2-pod, whatever it may be, at easy access to support the project. And let's see, technology, there may be, depending on where they're located, there may be some kind of wiring to make sure that they have the wiring for the computers. And we're going to fund this through the district, but also through some partnership. We're going to be looking at that as soon as we move forward on this. And currently we are taking some tours to different STEM programs, our schools. We have one planned for Friday at Kaleidoscope in Appleton. It's a Kaleidoscope Academy. So we're excited about that. And we also have gone to, we mentioned before, Waukesha STEM, and some others have gone to, was there another one? Okay, so we're researching as far as where we can get some more information and develop a really strong program. And I think that's all we have for budget.
As far as what our next steps are, a couple pieces that I just want to highlight. In your planning proposal, you have on the last page the or the M-STEM class schedule. And I just want to make reference that we're looking at doing the STEM program, the STEM classes, 5 periods out of the 7, which leaves 2 hours for the allied arts. Again, that schedule is just a visual representation. It's not to say where we are going to have the hours specifically. We're in the process right now at the secondary level looking at what the master schedules will look at both at the middle schools and high school. So it'll be a collaborative effort. But again, we just wanted a visual representation to show that we are doing 5 class periods of STEM. 6th graders will have the Phi-Ed. They'll also have Spanish and art and the music opposite of Phi-Ed. And then the 7th graders would have Phi-Ed, and they would have open spots in their schedule for different allied art electives. If it doesn't fit into the STEM program, we are currently working with the rec department to see if there's any options or opportunities outside the school day to allow students to continue some of their interests and being able to be educated on some of their interests. As far as where we are at, we're trying to continue our communication with parents. We have probably roughly 100 parents on a group email database that we've been giving periodic updates. We have 2 upcoming parent informational nights, Q&A sessions, one at Longfellow Middle School on February 29th and the other over at Whitman on March 5th. April mentioned our application window will be March 5th through the 23rd with the lottery taking place on the 26th. We are looking, as soon as we have an idea of how many applicants we have or how many students we'll have, we're looking at doing staffing fairly quickly so that way we can start or continue on with the curriculum process to see how everything's going to fit together and to get staff the professional development that they need so that way they're up to speed as far as the practices for STEM. Again, if anything needs to be changed with our curriculum, we would follow the process of School Board Policy 2210 and going in front of the Curriculum Council. We are also looking at finalizing some of our initial startup needs to get this up and running. Also looking at how the student schedule will play, looking at all the different options that students need to get in with the allied arts. Our goal is to have the ongoing staff development. And again, like April said, we're not looking at doing this just for whether it's 4, whether it's 6, whether it's 8, however many STEM teachers we have. We're looking to be able to have this grow into a practice throughout the middle school. Finally, we will be doing monthly school board updates so that way everyone is in the know of what is happening with the M-STEM program. That said, that is the completion of our formal presentation, and I'd like to open up for questions.
Board members, questions? Mrs. Fee?
I have lots of questions, and I'm sorry they're not terribly well organized, so if I hop about a bit, I apologize. Thank you very much for the extensive executive summary. There was a lot of information in there, and I appreciate having that as a background before having this presentation. And for the most part, it's excellent. One thing I noticed, however, that's entirely missing is any mention of English. So, which leads me to, how are you going to incorporate the district's goal, which pertains to reading, in the technology portion of this program? And how is this going to be staffed? Is it going to be like a regular house where you have a teacher who handles English and social studies and a teacher who handles science and math? How is that all going to work, and how are you going to achieve the district's reading goals within the M-STEM program?
I think I have all your questions.
Well, that's only the first one, but go ahead.
Okay. As far as ELA, how will that be incorporated? That'll be infused throughout all the different disciplines, the science, the technology, the engineering, the mathematics. That'll be infused throughout all of the class periods. A lot of what STEM is writing and reading and research, and all those components will be intertwined throughout all the activities that students are doing on a daily basis. There's a lot of different independent research that students need to do, as well as collaborative research. And throughout that, they are reading, they're collaborating, they're discussing, building upon those skills, and then they have to formulate it and put it into a written product, or some form of product to so the teacher can facilitate that learning and giving that student feedback throughout the process. How will it be staffed? We're looking at a multi-aged house within both the middle schools. And I think just to make it simple for math purposes, every 50 students we have, it'll be roughly a 2-person house. Right? If we have 100 students, that'd be a 4-person house. And we are going to open it up for applications as soon as we know the number, and then teachers within our schools can apply, and that's how we're looking at staffing.
Well, let me ask a follow-up to that. If from a budgetary standpoint, if you have 50 students pulled from 2 grades, that's not going to decrease the teaching needs in those respective grades to the point where we could simply move staff from, for instance, being a 7th grade teacher to being an MSTEM teacher. This sounds to me like we're going to need additional staff, which would be an additional expense for the district. Have you done do you have any hard numbers on whether or not this is going to require us to hire more staff to cover the same number of students?
We will not. We actually just use, it's just part of the staffing formula. So staff is allocated to the middle schools by total enrollment, whether it's in this program or it's in 6th grade, 7th grade. So we determine based upon the rolling averages from the past 5 years, the difference between the 2nd Friday in January and the 3rd Friday in September. We take the 2nd Friday numbers from January, and based on the formula, we say, okay, you've got 50.2 FTE, and it's a job in the building to allocate that staff. So from one year to another, whether there's 50 more students in 6th grade or 7th grade, or if they elect to take different courses, it's up to the building to staff it within that allocation, and that allocation would not increase.
Okay. I'll ask just one more, and then I'll let others have a chance. We've been working in the past few years to expand opportunities for middle schoolers. We have, for instance, a 7th grader could be in regular CMP math, advanced CMP math, algebra, or even perhaps geometry. How would going to the MSTEM affect the ability of our students to have those higher level classes, or on the other hand, have this extra support that they might need? Will there be the ability to differentiate within the MSTEM program?
Looking at different options, some of the different classes that you mentioned is, I think with STEM there are going to have to be some sacrifices depending on what a student is interested in. But as far as the different ability levels and stretching students, that is all incorporated with project-based learning, the inquiry-based learning. All those components will be in there, and that'll be up to the teacher or the facilitator who's working with that student to stretch that student and differentiate the different type of levels of instruction / what the targets are for that individual. That will be able to happen within our model. I look at a lot of the different successful STEM programs, and I don't know if Mr. Leach, if you want to come up here and respond to any of that, but there are different abilities that are in current project-based learning environments or STEM environments, and depending on how you're grouping students, how you're working with them, depending on some of those components will dictate on how you're stretching them. And I think looking at the collaborative practices that currently is happening over at WSTEM, at the Wauwatosa STEM School, those outcomes that students are setting for themselves, the goals that they're setting for themselves, it's the teacher's responsibility to help them reach that. So the differentiation is happening throughout the goal setting process with the student and the desired outcomes that student sets for themselves.
I think I had the opportunity to attend a transformation consortium this fall through CISA 1, and really talking a lot about individual pathways of learning. And I think that this MSTEM program, and with the corporation of the practice of project-based learning, that's really something that we're trying to achieve here, where there's a ton of flexibility. The kids are in a 5-hour block, and I think a lot of what I'm hearing throughout the district is the kids sometimes don't have enough time to delve deep enough into the content, because of all these other different responsibilities. And we've talked as a committee about, the education, the content being very silo, and not a lot of cross-curricular movement. And we're really trying to hope that to accomplish that. We're hoping that, in this 5-hour block, you might have kids working over here on their GTT project. We might have these kids, they might have to leave for 8th grade math because that's where they're at. These kids might be working on their presentation and along with that, their writing skills because they need to be effective communicators in reporting, their findings. So I think it really is very conducive to meeting individual needs. And I think also with the multi-age component, if there are some 8th graders that need to be pulled in, in this group with 7th and 6th graders to review something, it's actually a really nice way to do it. And I think when there's all this shifting and movement throughout the day and throughout the period, that there's kind of that peer effect is taken away, and kids don't have to even notice, who's being pulled and who's going where, when, and why.
Okay, thank you.
Also, another area, and I think going off the student interest, and I think that's one of the big lures to STEM, is in Wauwatosa they're doing the Future City project, and I believe that went over the course of 3 months. And depending on what area that a group of students focused on, that could stretch their learning, and the collaborative components that go along with it. It was really, when we went there, they were actually doing an application block. Where students were pulled from different classes and they were able to go into another teacher's room who is there to answer questions, to facilitate discussions. And again, it was something that, depending on the goals of each of the individual groups, that kind of determined what direction they would go, which really helped out, again, with stretching kids in a certain direction. There's also some areas that we're going to be looking at. We're currently using Compass. We have some students who are doing ALEX for individualized math programs and to stretch them. Those are other areas that we would use in our current, or in our program, to help stretch students in other ways. I know Waukesha currently has a specific time where all their students at the charter school are doing, I believe they're using ALEX. We're pricing out what the difference between ALEX and Compass and some of the different avenues that we've been using to help stretch students even further.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Oh, yes, Mr. Croner.
Thank you. Yeah, I also appreciated the proposal you gave us. It was very complete and helps me to think about things before I come to the meeting, so that was good. I'm going to start off with one thing that is my biggest criticism of charter schools, and that's the selection process. And that when a charter school is in effect, you have to select kids by lottery. And charter schools, by their nature, are specific learning experiences, so some children that might need that specific learning experience may get in, they may not, just by chance. So with a program, you're not restricted to that, but I still notice you're still using the full lottery procedure. So I would be pleased if you would reserve some seats for the administration to assign students to that. So if it's a type of program where in the future you know from experience this kind of child would really excel in this program, you might be able to offer that to some kids and their parents and be able to put them in there and not say, well, this would have been great for your child, but he didn't get in because they didn't win the lottery. Okay, so that's one thing I think you could modify it to make it a little more helpful, I think, to give kids that aren't succeeding in our standard curriculum, a better chance.
Mr. Croner, if I can just comment on that, I think that's inherent in the fact that it is a program and not a charter school, so we certainly can, and I know that has run through my mind as well, that because we're not automatically going to get 25, so it might be a way to accomplish that.
So I think that would be a good thing. I'm also concerned about English and history and things of those nature. I read an article a few months ago by the head of Lockheed, and he's an engineer, and his point of his essay was that he had come around to thinking that history was the most important subject, because without the critical thinking and the knowledge that you gain from courses like that, you can't be successful in the business world, you can't be a successful engineer. So considering that now students spend 2 hours a day, right, in English and history classes, how are you going to meet those standards? How are students going to learn U.S. history if they're not in a U.S. history class? How are you going to meet all those targets?
Again, they'll still be responsible for the same standards and benchmarks that our district set out for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and they'll be incorporating those throughout their projects that they're working on. and how they're applying it to other areas. So those components will all still be there. How we're assessing that is going to be quite a bit different than what we are currently seeing at the middle schools.
So when you come forward in the spring with your curriculum, and I assume the initial curriculum is going to go through the curriculum council as well?
If there's any modifications, the curriculum.
Well, doesn't the initial curriculum have to be approved?
If we're changing curriculum.
The initial curriculum will be what we have. It's just a different way of looking at it and delivering it.
Delivery model.
So you have to explain that a little differently to me.
Well, project-based learning, let's say that you're doing something you're doing an invention. You're creating something using scientific, I'm not a scientist,
Yeah.
so, but the outcome is, something movable that is, can do something, I don't know. But what you're going to do is you can look at, okay, who are the inventors around that time? What was happening in history around this time? You can include also, PowerPoint presentations or whatever it may be for communication aspects of it. So it's taking, the project-based learning is kind of opening up and getting like more than just like, okay, here's what's happening in history on these dates. What's the next thing that happens in history? It may not be sequential, but it's definitely that they're going to be getting the material. It's just in a different way, and sometimes it's more that they delve into it at a greater depth than even what the teachers are giving, because it just sparks an interest in them. I'm not sure if that helps a little bit. So it's the project-based learning and inquiry that.
So if I can rephrase it to see if I understand it.
Okay.
There's 2 8th graders leave Longfellow Middle School. One was in the STEM program and one wasn't. They should have had the same overall science material, the same history material, the same English material, and should be just as prepared for the same freshman courses as the other students. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess maybe to give a concrete example, when we were at the Wilson STEM School, I saw a program that could fully integrate a lot of the standards and benchmarks for different content areas within the 6th grade. So 6th grade standards are, for social studies, it's culture and 5 themes for social studies. And the project was the $1 million project, where you inherited $1 million, but you can't keep it. You have to do research and you give it away. Who would you give it away to? So the students were actively researching different countries. And so if you were looking at Latin America, for example, which is again one of the content areas, one of the standards that we look at in 6th grade for social studies, you'd be doing research. You'd be looking at the different countries there, looking at different organizations. Bits and pieces is another part of the 6th grade curriculum. It deals with fractions, decimals, and percents. So obviously with $1 million to give away, you don't have to give it to one organization, but multiple organizations. All the while you're using technology to do the research, and then you have to have a presentation piece, which is the writing. And so there's a lot of reading. So within that one project, it incorporated standards from many different areas. So again, the standards were the same, but the way that the students engaged with it was totally different.
Okay, that wasn't clear from reading this. I thought it was more going to be newer things, technology-oriented, engineering-oriented. And I know you're adding some of that, but I get it. I think I get it now.
I think the emphasis is that we are all going to end up at the same place. It's just how we're getting there is a little different.
My other question, from looking at the schedule, and you used the word students might have to make sacrifices, so I'm guessing that students in the STEM program won't have the same time in the day to pursue music and foreign language and art and other things as other students will. Did I understand that correctly?
6th graders have to take music, they have to take Phi-Ed and art. So all 3 of those will be incorporated. Currently, the wheel is changing at the middle school for 6th graders. Right now they're looking at 12 weeks of art. We are looking at art opposite of, for an example, it might be Spanish, it might be gym, it might be Phi-Ed. So we're looking at doing art a longer duration. We're looking at doing music and Phi-Ed probably opposite of each other, which 6th graders are currently getting. So we're looking at doing that a little bit differently, the art. Some of the electives that the 7th graders might have to take or be able to take, that might be sacrificed a bit because of where the STEM classes would fall. And again, that's why we're looking at other options. For example, looking through the rec department to see if there's any exploratory classes that they could be taking outside the school day and seeing if that could be as an option for some of our students.
So would a student be able to stay in music throughout middle school?
They would.
And can they will be able to take a foreign language throughout middle school?
There's
If they choose
there's
to.
a strong possibility that would happen depending on where our schedule falls. Right now, the 6th graders are for sure going to be taking Spanish, just like all the other 6th graders. But again, we have to see where the schedule would fall and how that would fit in the master schedule. But our goal is for students to be able to have some options. But again, if those options aren't available, for an example, let's say a 7th or 8th grader could not take a world language, looking at doing something with the rec department after school to see if that's an option, or on the weekends.
And I think my last question for the moment is, I think on page 5 you talked about using hybrid learning. Now in the high school, hybrid learning, if I understand it right, is part-time in class and part-time do work on your own at home. Is that the definition you're using here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially looking at the project-based learning, that's a component that's built in. Is there going to be something that the students are using with Blackboard at home and having that one-to-one dialogue with the teacher, one-to-one dialogue with one of their classmates? So yes, we are looking at multiple different ways of incorporating technology outside of school to that face-to-face inside of school.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mrs. Randall?
First of all, thank you to everybody who's been involved. I know that this goes way above and beyond what you're expected, and so I appreciate it. And I think I have to ask you, because I'm looking at this kind of opposite of Mrs. Fee and Mr. Kroner when it comes to differentiation. To me, this is differentiation. This is the end result, right? If you're trying to find other ways for students to learn. So it's not a matter of, am I thinking that right? I mean, I have to ask because it sounds kind of counter to the other questions.
For sure. I think one of the things, one example that we've used that's very simple and at the elementary level is when we went to Wauwatosa STEM, they talked about kids taking the initiative with their learning, and they said the little kids, would get 3 circles, and we tell the kids a lot what we expect of them and what we want them to do. And so we'll say, here's 3 circles, we need you to make a snowman. And the kids will make their snowman, and then we'll hang them up in the hall, and we'll see a lot of different variations, but pretty much kind of the same thing. We'll see some kids that have some fine motor skills, they need to work on their cutting, someone used too much glue, and some kids have some spatial issues with proportions to the face. But in project-based learning, I mean, it's as simple as saying, here's 3 circles, we want you to make a snowman, but this time your snowman has to solve a problem and have one movable part. So it's just kind of a different lens in which to approach learning.
Well, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just about to add, looking at the last few years of our staff development with the building leadership team, you're seeing a lot of different modalities in the classroom that are really the days of a teacher standing up in front of a class for 51 minutes. Those days are very numbered. I mean, there's always going to be a time for that, but you're not seeing that 5 days out of the week. You might see it here and there, depending on what's being presented. But I look at all the different components that STEM offers, and we're seeing that throughout elementary, we're seeing that throughout middle school, and I think it's best practices that we're going to continue to see it grow. And as staff are collaborating, I'm very excited to hear that we have the opportunity to look at K-8, or right now K-7, for STEM, as far as collaboration on Wednesdays, looking at vertical collaboration. How does that continue to go on once we have the 8th grade? And then looking at how the project lead the way teachers can be incorporated into that collaboration. I think it's just going to continue to stem and build teachers' repertoires as far as engaging students.
I think also one of the components that's come up is when you're looking at STEM education, we can expect these teachers to be certified engineers, scientists, and technologists, and mathematicians. So part of what we're hoping to with our partnerships is to bring in partnerships and experts in these areas to enhance the learning. So if they're doing something with vertical gardens, then we're gonna have a steering committee that is going to talk to Sweetwater and see what kind of opportunities there are for them to come in and help teach our kids, and we're going to bring the experts to the kids to help enhance their learning.
And there's also there's already a lot of partnerships out there, and hopefully with having another Now the program, it's also going to build that for WSTEM and vice versa, so that collaborative and the different partners that we can have coming in to educate our students. I mean, Mike was talking, I remember hearing him at the open house a couple weeks ago about they're doing something in particular with human anatomy, so they reached out to the medical college and a doctor came in and spoke to the kids. You know, and what better type of education can our kids get by having an expert in the field?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this fits. We've been talking for a long time about 21st century learning, and that now we're putting it into place. The other comment I have is regarding the WSTEM at Wilson School. I remember when that started, and we talked a lot about what is a charter. That was our first initiative with a charter, and one of the things was that the hope would be that the practices in that charter could then be shared in the district of the chartering authorizer. So that was one of the responsibilities that we as a board had as authorizers to, you know, hopefully approve a program that we could then bring into the district in some other manner. And again, to me, this is a good example of that. I have two quick little technical questions. Ms. Greenman, you said, I think you said, as far as the lottery goes, the document we got said priority will go to existing fifth graders in the STEM program now, but did you say something about sixth graders also?
Right, because currently, right now, we have sixth graders that they didn't have a program to go into. So our sixth graders that were in WSTEM would be then allowed to also jump in now, even missing a year. I mean, obviously,
Okay, so it is kids who have been in the WSTEM.
Yes.
Okay.
And then open it up from there.
Okay, I had one other question that I forgot, so. Couldn't have been that important.
Yes, Mrs. Newfield?
Thank you. Wonderful questions. This is just, I'm going to use this word again tonight, phenomenal, really wonderful opportunity for the kids. I do have a couple of requests, some of what you already heard tonight. The adding spaces for referral students. I thought that was a very good point made this evening. Also, allied arts. I really do think that the students are needing to benefit. I understand sixth grade is more limited, but 7th and 8th grade, we need to find a way to incorporate that in to the programming. It's very important. I understand that the finances are a little bit fuzzy right now, and that your group is going to be working on that. I'd like to see that come back to the board at your next report so that we have a better understanding of our investment and also understand more about the partnerships and what their investments are. I believe in you. I see your vision. I see this as a way we need to advance the students in the district, and I'm going to be very positive. One thing I'm wondering, when you talk to the students and you talk to the families that are interested, what do you say at this stage? It does seem a little bit like a leap of faith. Can you comment a little bit about those conversations and what you will do between now and March to firm that up?
First off, we start off by telling them that there's going to be informational night in February, late February, and then there's going to be another one in March. We always ask for their email so that way they can stay up to date as far as some of how we're moving forward. A lot of our conversations right now initiated with parents requesting that come from WSTEM. So what we tell parents is we're looking at doing a very similar type of environment at the middle schools, and right now we're still waiting to kind of move forward after our presentation from tonight to see what type of feedback we get from the school board, and then we can move forward. So our conversations and information has been very limited to parents because, again, we wanted to be able to make sure we have the appropriate information back to parents after our feedback tonight. Now, moving forward, we'll be able to give more information as far as how how many students we're looking at. That needs to be the minimum per school. Actually, we've been giving that information. We're looking at both locations. It would be a lottery process with students having WSTEM experience preferential, or they'd be getting into the lottery. As far as specific questions about curriculum, as far as space in the buildings, those questions haven't come up from parents, but we'll have a good response back to parents with that information on our 29th and March 5th informational night. So and I guess to sum that up, the questions haven't been that specific from the parents to date, but we have been giving parents information along the way as we move forward.
The reality is parents are going to be taking a leap of faith. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Our job is to build the confidence in those parents that what we're saying is going to happen is actually going to happen, and that a year later they can make they can look at it and say, yeah, it wasn't really a leap of faith and we got there. And I think we have some experience with that last year when we had parents signing up for the Montessori school and walking through across the hall and seeing medical office space. So we've kind of gone through it, but certainly it's a leap of faith, and that's how I would start it off with parents. You are taking a leap of faith, but we have an established curriculum. This is just teachers delivering the model in a different way. So it's not as big of a leap of faith as one might look at it.
5 years ago.
I also wanted to say that when I've talked to people, I basically say it's a different learning style. A project-based curriculum is not for every kid. When you look at first Legos or you do Rube Goldberg, a kid will, one of my team members from Rube Goldberg will spend 3 hours working on something, and the only reason why they're willing to leave is to go to do basketball, a game or something else like that. They're that focused and they want to continue on a project. They get it done and work through and talk to engineers and figure out how to do things. So it's a different thought process. Some kids will not want to work 3 hours on a Friday night working on a project, doing that and working to accomplish the operation. So it's a way of trying to learn and get information and be successful at doing a long-term project.
I think the other piece, the example that I always give is our the Lego Robotics Club at the middle school. Initially, we had 3 or 4 kids come in during the summer, and when you're registering and saying you're interested in this, we did something similar at the elementary. Do you have anything at the middle school? So Jerry helped out. We initially had enough for 1 team. A short while after, more and more kids came and was like, this is too big for 1 team. We eventually had 4, and then Whitman also had that same interest, so they were also adding a team. So that's one example that we always throw out there with the parents, because it's an extended learning opportunity, you know, the Lego Robotics Club, but that principle of the STEM is infused in it, and it really draws students in. So again, I think Dr. Ertl said it best. It's a leap of faith, but we know it's one that's going to engage our learners.
Okay, thank you.
Just one last comment on it, not to keep beating up your question, but I will. Not beat it up, answer it. I think a component to remember also, and a way to explain that, is this is really just the middle school. We have a team. The students are on this team. It's by choice, but oftentimes parents choose to go with a group of teachers or asked to be with a group of teachers at the middle school as well. So this is somewhat similar to that. And when you look at the cost of doing this, it's not going to be much different, because 80% of our costs are the staff anyway, and we have the staff built into the buildings. There's no additional cost for that. So I know you had mentioned the budget, but we'll refine that more, and we'll use existing funds and then present it in the budget in June, and May and June as well. So,
Michael.
Oh, wow. This isn't, the school board created this culture itself, but to lead people to believe that we should have monthly reports on a program affecting 100 kids. If we have a monthly report on a program affecting 100 children, then the school board has lost focus, because something we discuss on a monthly basis should be in line with our core values and core focus affecting a majority of the children. That's not the comment on the quality of your program. That's just to say these initiatives affecting a relatively small number of children certainly are very important. But I'll note it is most of what we're talking about tonight, and we're not talking about much else as a school board. I have some concerns about this. There's no substitute for an O. Henry short story or having to suffer the pain of memorizing the charge or suffering the pain of having to memorize the charge of the Light Brigade in 7th grade. There is value in those things, and I don't see those things here. We have a district focus on language, and that there would be language opportunities in 7th grade as only a, quote, strong possibility, unquote, I think would be a loss of focus and a deviation from our commitment. I don't think the kids who do this program will end up in the same place as kids who don't do this program. I also have some concerns about the bring your own technology concept, because there will be those who cannot afford to bring their own technology. And should those kids not apply because they're automatically a step behind? I've been there when I could not afford the technology. It matters. And so I speak from some experience in those things. So there's a number of questions here. To have 5 of 7 periods, I believe, is too much. And that's not to say I question the commitment to science and to engineering and to mathematics. I'm a believer in that. I focused on those myself very heavily up through 12th grade. So I'm not ready to sing Kumbaya yet on this one. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Several comments. Yes.
May I just make a comment?
Sure.
Hearing other people, I'm thinking, I think I can ask the question that explains my I think I can explain my confusion a little better. So when I think of a STEM program, that's science, technology, engineering, and math. When you call a program a STEM program, to me that implies it's more of an emphasis on science, technology, and engineering and math than the standard program has. But yet you're also saying that you're going to use the same curriculum, which implies equal weight to the English and the history and the math and the science that we're doing now. So my conflict with me is I don't quite understand whether this is just, it really is just a project-based learning school that's using our normal curriculum just with a different teaching style, or is this really a STEM program that's focusing on science, technology, engineering, and math, in which case concerns about not including enough English and social sciences are valid. So to me that needs to be fleshed out a little more, maybe in future meetings when you describe the curriculum, that will be made more clear. So that's my
one of the
concern.
pieces I've noticed is we'll, in a future update, we'll definitely get information on how some of those other components of the other curricular areas would be infused.
So if you had to answer tonight, is it a STEM program with increased emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and math, or is it just our current curriculum taught in a project-based learning model? Or both?
I think it's both.
I think, yeah, you'd hear answers that would reflect both of those. And I think we're at this point now where, based on the feedback from tonight, that we will move forward and have that solidified the next time. Or another curriculum council. But I do really value your comments on the literacy. I think that was one of the biggest fears 5 years ago at the charter school, was that people are afraid to put their children in this program because we weren't going to teach reading. And somebody's like, you know what, I'm a first grader, I'm going to send them to, traditional school in the district so that they learn reading, and then I'll think about, applying in 2nd grade for them. And for me as a parent, being a part of this process, I feel a little disappointed that we didn't highlight that enough in our proposal. But for me, it's like inherent that this is literacy based. The science, the technology, the engineering is literacy based. We cannot be preparing these kids to be scientists or maybe not. It's just this lens in which we're looking at without having this foundation in literacy. It's crucial. It's crucial to their development. It's crucial to their communication. It's crucial to how they investigate and communicate what it is that they're learning. So I do have some regret about that, but certainly for all of us, we talk about, it's almost like it's just assumed that the literacy will be core to this. It has to be.
I just want to make one comment too. Future City requires that each student write a 1,500-word document at a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade describing their city. And it's quite detailed and it's quite organized. And that's what, when we were out at the Wauwatosa STEM school, that's what the kids were doing. We were sitting in the hallway with their laptop writing a fairly lengthy document like that. I also think that from a free-form journal standpoint, that instead of trying to write on a specific topic, that a kid may want to, as my son was trying to do describing terraforming on Mars, and was trying to go into detail, and the teacher said, well, no, you need to go back in and focus in on my subject, instead of writing organized, very long paragraphs on things that he's read and everything else. So the key here was, do I try to push him into describing his feelings or what he did today, or do I let him go in and write organized paragraphs and everything else on a technical topic? The other thing too, I will also tell you that engineers love to read outside of technical reading, because you read so much technical information. So I read a lot of different types of literature as well, and I also find that engineers that are very well read are probably more creative than those that are only focused into their particular area of study.
And I just would like to say that, you know, I'm a 6th grade science teacher in the district, but as my principals can attest, I teach reading and writing as well. So yes, the class is science, the lens is science, but I'm integrating literacy strategies pretty much daily, comparing and contrasting, questioning, inferencing, all of these rich literacy instructional pieces I have in my classroom, even though the class is a science class. I think if we use that model for STEM, we're saying that we're going to teach and present ELA, U.S. history, but there might be more of a science and technology focus in which we do that. We still want to make sure that we have well-rounded students that have all of the subjects covered.
Mary Jo?
You know, I'm hearing there's going to be a strong fidelity to the district standards and benchmarks. And how will those be measured? The same testing that they would go through if they were not part of the program, is that correct?
I think students will be, they'll be measured with the same, or the outcomes need to be the same as far as how they're measuring. The assessment tools would look different. Is that what you're asking?
Well, are they also going to partake in MAPS?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm getting
testing,
at. That's what I
testing,
took
yes.
from this, that you are going to be, you know, loyal to what we have created in the way of benchmarks.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So to me, you know, this leap of faith, it's kind of an interesting thing, and I'm going to show my age here, but, you know, having raised 3 adult children and now having 2 grandchildren, it's like every time you send them out the door, it's a leap of faith. Whether it's kindergarten or high school or college or to the store by themselves or to the mall or whatever, you know, it's a leap of faith. And you do what you can to make sure that the environment they're stepping into is safe, healthy, whatever. And in an educational setting, you do your best to find out that they're going to get what they need. So, yeah, it's always a leap of faith. It's a leap of faith, and the more that parents can be involved, and the more you can tailor things to what you know about your child's learning style. And Mr. Meyer, I probably would argue with you about having to read a specific thing. And I understand completely what you're saying. It's a discipline type of thing, and it's, you know, you just have to do this. And true, there are things in life we have to do, but I'll tell you, having one child who just learns in his very own way, very different from the other children I had and from a lot of kids that I know the importance of looking for another path, because you might make them do it, but you might also be damaging, you know, their idea of what education is, what school is. You want them to want to learn. And so to me, you know, that's what we're trying to do here, is to reach all different kids. So for what that's worth. But I do expect that there will be a high bar set for English and social studies and everything else. So.
Yes, Mrs. Fee?
I'll just make one suggestion or request as you continue in your planning process. I am concerned as we develop all these new programs that we are subjecting our German and our French programs to a slow death, because we're making it harder and harder for students to take those classes. Because oftentimes in the 7th and 8th grade there's only one section. And if a student has a conflict, they're not able to take that class, which feeds upwards to a smaller and smaller number of students taking these classes. So if there is flexibility in this program, I would ask that you consider whether there's enough flexibility to allow the student to go to take that class whenever it has to be scheduled, because that's where it fits in the middle school schedule. Because Spanish doesn't seem to be a problem, and obviously all the 6th graders are going to be in Spanish. But those other languages, I'm concerned, it's very difficult sometimes. And if a student really wants to take that, they should be allowed to do that. So I would ask that you consider that as you continue in your planning.
No? I strongly support the foreign language, so please give some emphasis on that. The teachers that you spoke of, will you be recruiting through current staff and also outside? What is the direction of that?
We are going to be having an application window for staff who are currently in our school district, and we'll screen applicants just like we normally would during staffing and hire the most appropriate staff for the positions at both middle schools.
So you could go outside also, is that correct?
Hopefully not.
Okay.
No, the intention is to have our current staff and not hire, but transfer and move. Or just relocate within the building.
In our discussions with our steering committee, all the talent that has stepped up and wanted to be on this committee and looking on how to make this program a reality, there's a lot of talent that wants to be a part of this. So we're very excited about having that opportunity to be talking with a lot of great teachers about what would be the best fit for the kids.
And then you mentioned, and it's been discussed a little bit, the monthly meeting report. When did you plan on beginning those reports? And I ask because there's a lot of questions here tonight, which tells me that those monthly meeting reports could be very valuable. And maybe some will be shorter than others. Just correct me if I'm not speaking the facts.
I'll respond to that. It's monthly reports. It doesn't necessarily mean a monthly meeting report. So whether it's documentation or just an update of where the planning process is at. So it doesn't necessarily mean a report to the board that there's a presentation. It could.
But it could be?
It could be. But it certainly will consist of written documentation.
Okay, because really, there's a lot to learn on this, and it's so exciting. It's another opportunity for our young people. And then may I ask if Mr. Leach and Mr. Galen have anything that they feel has been missed that you'd like to comment on?
Nothing additional at this time.
Okay. Mr. Leach?
I certainly can help establish some understanding of I look forward to working with literacy practices and what they mean across multiple disciplines. shed some light on that from the elementary perspective.
I think as I listen tonight, it continues. We're excited. We want the best for the children. It's another opportunity. I repeat myself, but it's here and it's in Wauwatosa and it's exciting. So, thank you to each one of you for all the time. Mr. Anderson also, I know, has put a great deal into this. Is there any further comment before I open it up to the audience? Is there any comment on this report, please, from the audience? Okay, thank you again. Dr. Earl, I believe the Tosa School of the Trade Center contract revision is scheduled for a different evening. We will not be hearing anything this evening, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And then the next item is the Personnel Committee, and I'd like to announce the committee. Ann Fee, and I would like Mrs. Fee to serve as the chair of the meetings, Mr. Croner, Mrs. Randall, and myself. And we will be meeting with the administrative leadership, and the meetings will be scheduled when items come concerning personnel that need to be addressed. All items, all discussions will be completely shared with the board, asking for input. Does anyone have any questions, please? Okay, and Mrs. Fee, then when you will keep the committee informed when we would need the first meeting, and I would suggest
We'll
you
have to discuss
confer
that with
with
Dr. Erdl.
But I was just going to say you'd have to do that. So, but thank you. Is there anything else that the audience would like to comment on? Board members? Seeing none, I believe we are in order for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Thank you. Let's take roll call on the adjournment, please.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Giroux?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes.
Mrs. Weber?
Yes, thank you to each of you. You can